So just to do some introductions, I'm Andrew Jackson. I'm one of the associate principals. We've got David Morgan, who is head of studies, and Kate O'Farrell, who is our careers education manager. And also really pleased to have with us Jamie Bradford from De Montfort University, who we are basically all the warmer pack for Jamie to talk about student finance in the most engaging way later on. But we hope that you'll find all of the information that we present to you of use. So on the screen, just information about what we're going to cover. I won't read through all that. So some information about various processes for various things, and hopefully some time for you to put any questions that you want to into the Q&A function and for us to respond to those. So it falls to me to talk a little bit about destinations where our students have gone to in the students who left us in 2024. So potentially too much information on that screen. What we're looking at is the sort of the 2024 percentage, so and also the 2024 numbers. So just to give an idea of the scale at which we're working, we have approaching 1,500 students who are in their final year of study with us at any one time, and they, on the whole, about 3/4 of them progress on to higher education, and the vast majority of the rest go into employment or training, either into apprenticeships or into other forms of employment that have some training alongside them. And so given that, we will start off and talk a little bit in more detail about the higher education routes and the progressions into that, but then we will also spend some time talking about routes into apprenticeships in particular, so that you have the information about both of those main routes this evening.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Sorry, jumping in there. Good evening, everyone. I think my focus is going to be on the university application process at the college, and the variety of different support that we can give students and are giving students currently in terms of those university applications. So the UCAS process for entry 2026 is well underway now. So just to give you an idea, and this relates to what you can see on the slide, students began registering with UCAS last week. That's when the registration opened the week before half term. We've started to do that process from last week in PPM sessions, so the personal progress mentor sessions that students have at the college. And what that means is they register with UCAS, they register an account, they set up their own hub, and they link themselves to the college. They link their application to the college. So that's the start of that support, really. And that support is now ongoing throughout the rest of the process. So, and certainly for the next couple of weeks as we head towards the summer breaks. So students in their PPM sessions will be having sessions around making informed choices and writing personal statements, which we'll get to shortly. So in addition, PPMs will be having one-to-ones with their students over the coming weeks and going into the autumn term, again, to really, dig deeper into what each of our students want to go and study, and or what they want to do post 18, and again, put in that additional support for those students. In addition to the PPMs, we have the careers service, which is obviously headed up by Kate, and again, they provide a range of support across the academic year for students, again, considering university. And a big part of that, again, is one-to-one careers meetings, and they can be set up to explore initial ideas, to help students narrow down ideas or choices, really explore, career ambitions and, which university courses might benefit those or support those career ambitions. So again, there's a range of support from Kate and her team. It's worth noting that throughout the academic year, we've already started really the process of supporting students with their university studies. So earlier in the year, we had a careers fair, but also the HE exhibition, which was in March. And we had over 70 institutions come to the college, and students were able to walk around one of our sports halls and, go and speak to representatives from those universities. And very excitingly, we've got something really amazing that we do every year. Again, Kate and her team really put a lot of work into this and organize this. It's FutureWise, and that's on the 25th of June. So all year 1 students or year 12 students should be attending that. They can attend a minimum of 3 sessions, and again, they're with universities coming in to speak about something very specific. And all students should be attending a personal statement workshop as part of that day. And that day, lessons don't take place. That is the focus, and students will be getting information about that in their PPM sessions, and then are able to decide which sessions to attend. So really encourage them to attend that. It is mandatory, actually. The sort of final strand of support is really from UCAS website itself and the universities, and again through UCAS Hub, they can sign up for open days. We really encourage students to get to open days, and where possible, if parents can go, open days are just essential as part of this process. Supporting students to, again, make those informed decisions, the location, the facilities, the opportunity to speak to lecturers and current students at those universities. And the other aspect of this to kind of really look at is the course search. And this, I think this is something that parents and carers can be supporting their young people with. We're introducing this, or have been over the last couple of weeks, but the course search on the UCAS website, and they can access it through their application, is so useful. Again, looking at the course content, the modules, how things are assessed and examined, the entry requirements, and so on and so forth. So that's the range of support that's available to students who are considering university. So I'm going to move on now and talk about the UCAS process at WQE. And we are, as you're all aware, a large college, and our process might differ to a smaller centre in a couple of aspects, really. So this year, for the 2025 entry, we basically sent off about 1,250 applications. So again, we're a big centre, but the way we organise this and support students is obviously, we speak to students, we identify those who want to go to university. They are in the process of registering. As it says, subject staff are currently working on predicted grades and writing comments, so for references. So we're about to enter the 3rd year of the new reference process, or formula, really. So a university reference is now divided into 3 sections, and the subject teachers have to write sort of comments that will support the application. And just a note about predictions: students will be given predictions ahead of the summer break to enable them to, really start, looking at courses. But in the autumn term, there are opportunities for those predictions to potentially change. We don't cap them just before the summer. What's really important here is there are a maximum of 5 choices, and we encourage students to choose, make 5 choices. For those applying for medicine, veterinary science, and dentistry, they would choose 4. So let's say it's a medic that they're choosing for medicine choices, and then they would choose another, and that's very often something like pharmacy or biomedical science or something along those lines. So that UCAS process will continue, and the job of the PPM is to support all throughout, checking the application, making sure the students filling in accurately, but also again, the PPM pulls together the reference, and we do a lot of support for the PPMs to make sure that these references are, I would say, fantastic. Our job is to make sure that these references are really strong to support the application. There's lots of support again to make sure that students are writing good personal statements. That support comes particularly again from the careers team, PPMs, but also subject staff. Very often will look at personal statements from that subject specialist perspective. So students will also eventually, they will submit their application, and I'll get onto that bit in a minute. We'll go through the internal deadlines. But the UCAS application fee for next year is £28.95. And then what then happens is once the student has paid and submitted, the PPM will check and approve it. It will then go to our admin team, and they have again, they've been trained to do this. They will have another set of eyes on it and double check to make sure everything is accurate. And that's what we have to do on such a large scale when we're sending over 1,000 applications. And then the UCAS application will be sent. And as it says, universities will then make offers, and often they're very quick with their offers, and they will make conditional or unconditional offers. And the majority of our students will receive 5 offers. Just a note that this process is the same for all students at WQE, including those studying at LCPA and Studio 79. So again, it's via the PPM. Those in those specialist provisions, they obviously work very closely with the specialists at those institutions, but we have a strong working relationship with them. And again, we make sure that these applications go off for our partners as well. Okay. So I've talked about condition. Well, I'll just make a note on conditional and unconditional offers. As part of the process, once the application has gone, students will receive conditional or unconditional offers or a potential rejection. Just to say that, again, most students do receive a conditional offer, and the conditions are usually that they have to achieve a certain set of grades or a certain set of tariff points. Some students will receive unconditional offers, and these do happen. They're often linked to actually the student placing, when they make their final choices, placing that university as their choice or their first choice. What's really important to note here is there is something called UCAS Extra. So if students don't receive offers, so perhaps they receive rejections, or perhaps the student changes their mind between February and July of the second year, UCAS have something called UCAS Extra, and students are able to make an additional choice if they don't hold any offers. So if they've either been rejected from all 5, or they've decided to change their mind and withdraw from those offers. So again, we support students making those choices. We make them aware of this process, UCAS Extra. Moving on to interviews, students are called to interview, but for the majority of courses, there are no interviews. They are made offers on the strength of the application and the predicted grades. There are some courses that do interview. They tend to be, again, things like medicine, dentistry, vet science, nursing, primary education. Some social work courses will interview. So those sorts of courses will interview, and we do provide support. Again, much of that support will come from Kate. Those applying for Oxbridge and medicine, etc. Again, we've got a very systematic approach towards mock interviews, again using a variety of people, including subject specialists and contacts we have at local universities providing that support as well. The system will continue throughout the year until all offers have been received. And then we support, as part of the process, students to make their firm and insurance choices. Their firm is where they want to go the most, and the insurance is the backup. And students will be making those choices really from probably, well, it could be as early as March, going into April and May. And as I've just mentioned, we do offer the same support for students at our partner institutions, and it's also the same process really for those applying for art foundation, conservatoires, the drama schools. And because we've got a large art provision at the college, we're very much sort of experienced in supporting students applying for those art-based courses. Okay, so I'm going to just briefly talk about our internal deadlines, just sort of conscious of time. So the internal deadlines are these. So we actually have an internal deadline of the 5th of September for students to complete their My Profile section of their application. We ask early applications, so our applicants, who are those who are applying for Oxbridge, medicine, etc., to complete their application by the 12th of September, because that gives us a month before the external deadline of the 15th of October to really work on it with the student, make sure that everything is as good as it can be for those early applications. Applications to competitive universities, so the Russell Group, the Sutton 30 institutions, the internal deadline for that is the 31st of October. Again, that just gives lots of time prior to the external deadline, which is the 14th of January 2026. And for all courses, we're asking students to submit their applications by the 21st of November. And that seems to be a long time ahead of that external deadline. But, you know, again, we're a large college and we want to make sure that students have that support, that the personal statement is great, and everything is accurate on the form before we send it. Okay. And again, just final kind of point really, many students will consider a year out, and just to touch on the kind of two approaches here really. So some students will defer and some will wait until the following year as a former student to apply. And it really depends on the student's plans. So some students will apply this year, so for the entry 26, but they will then defer their application or their entry until the following year. And that suits lots of students, particularly those who have a really clear plan about what they want to do and where they want to go. But we also make sure that students are able to apply after they've left college. So lots of our students obviously decide to take a gap year, do whatever they want to do in that gap year, but we ensure that they are able to, via us, and all the details we pass on to students before they leave, just before their exam study period, but the information is also on the website. And we, even though the student is no longer a WQE student, they're obviously on their gap year, they're able to come back to us and we support their application. So for example, this year we've supported about 130 former students who didn't defer with their UCAS applications this year, even though they are no longer a student with us. So, you know, it's really important that you're aware that we don't just cut them adrift once they've left. We support those applications, and they received a reference. We provide them with that support with their application. Okay, and the final bit just to consider really in terms of taking a year out, and it is a popular option, as I've said, you know, 130 students have taken a year out and have applied this year. So I won't necessarily read through all of that. You can see that, but you know, there are some important kind of points to sort of pick up there. But the obvious, you know, benefit of deferring is the place is secure before a gap year. So the student knows that they've got their place, and then they can go off and work, travel, volunteer, whatever they plan to do. The significant positive for not deferring and applying the following year is that they have their actual grades, and they can really use those actual grades to make those informed decisions. So I think that pretty much brings an end to what I have to say in terms of the UCAS process. I'm going to hand over to Kate, who will talk about alternative options. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Yeah, I'm just trusting that someone can move my slides on for me. Thank you, but this is the first one. So thanks very much, David, and it's great to see everybody here this evening. We wanted to make sure that we spent some time this evening talking about some alternative options to traditional university. We know students are keen to explore all of the options that they have to help them make good decisions about their future plans. I'm going to spend most of the time talking about apprenticeships, specifically at higher and degree level apprenticeships, because this is really the main alternative to university and something that we know lots and lots of our students are interested in exploring. But before I do that, I just wanted to mention a couple of other options. One is a fairly new entrant to the qualification landscape, so HTQs or higher technical qualifications. These are level 4 or 5 qualifications, so they're equivalent to year 1 and year 2 of a university degree. They're vocational qualifications, and they've actually been developed against specific employer standards. So locally, they're offered at colleges, including Leicester College and North Warwickshire and South Leicestershire College, and covering areas like construction management, space technology, engineering, digital, those sorts of areas. The tuition fees and the entry requirements will vary by institution and by course. It might be good to think about for somebody who perhaps doesn't want to commit to doing a full degree but has an interest in one of the sectors and wants a higher level qualification in this area. Higher education in further education kind of overlaps a little bit with higher technical qualifications. So this is essentially studying for university level courses at a further education college. For example, for us, that would be somewhere like Leicester College. This is great for students who prefer to study somewhere perhaps a bit smaller than a traditional kind of large university, and the requirements and the course fees can be lower. The year in industry is something specifically really for students who are considering a gap year, and it's run by the Engineering Development Trust, and it offers students paid placements that they can take up during a gap year in STEM, so science, technology, engineering or maths, and applications for the year in industry will usually open in the autumn term. So that's kind of a broad overview of some of the alternatives to traditional university that our students may be considering. If you could just move on to the next slide, please, about what is an apprenticeship. Thank you. So any apprenticeship is a full-time job with a qualification attached. The qualification is linked to the job role and it's nationally recognised. And in addition, all of the training is paid for by the employer, and the apprentice is paid a salary from day one. On the next slide, we'll move on to look at apprenticeship levels. So there are different levels of apprenticeship, and the level corresponds to the level of qualification that the apprentice will achieve. So if it's a level 3 apprenticeship, the apprentice will achieve a level 3 qualification. That may be an MVQ. Level 3, it could be a vocational diploma or another professional qualification at level 3. Level 4 is equivalent to year 1 of a university course, level 5 to year 2, and level 6 means that the student will receive a degree exactly the same as if they'd gone to university to study in the traditional way. There is progression from level 4 to level 6. So some companies will put their apprentices onto a level 4 qualification with a view to them progressing to level 6 once they've achieved that qualification. If you just move on to the next one, thank you. I'm going to focus now on higher and degree level apprenticeships because we know this is the area that our students are really interested in. So initially launched in 2009, higher and degree level apprenticeships are still the smallest of all the levels, but there is growth and it is a proposed growth area. So just over the last few years, we've seen more apprenticeships at this level, including the teaching degree apprenticeship and the solicitor degree apprenticeship. We'd expect to see some more development on this over the next few years. As with any apprenticeship, there are a mixture of work and training, with the salary and all other costs paid for by the company. The sectors that you tend to see most opportunities in at this level include accounting and finance, business, admin, construction, engineering, transport, logistics, those type of sectors. There are entry requirements. These can range quite drastically from 3As down to kind of BCC, and some apprenticeships don't have any requirements, but they are looking for students to demonstrate those employability skills. They're going to be investing a huge amount of money in their apprentices, and they need to be sure that they're going to be reliable, be able to work in a team, have good communication skills, those kind of employability skills. So want to point out to you, as we point out to our students, these opportunities are extremely competitive. The latest data from UCAS is that 430,000 students expressed an interest in higher and degree apprenticeships through their site, compared to just under 5,000 under 19-year-olds who actually started at level 4 or above. We think it's really important to understand how competitive these opportunities are, not to put students off applying, but so they understand the context and the fact they're going to need to put in a significant amount of effort in order to succeed, supported by us, of course, in careers and the wider staff at the college. It's also important for students to understand, so they know how important it is to have a backup plan. This could be university, it could be a level 3 apprenticeship, but it's really important to have that backup plan in place. However, as we often say to students, someone has to get these opportunities, so why shouldn't it be you? Our students do apply for these opportunities and they do get them. Earlier on in the year, we've had successful students progressing into opportunities with EDF, E.ON, Rolls-Royce, Mars and other local accounting firms. And every year at the careers fair, we welcome back ex-students who are now working for companies who recruited them at the careers fair. In terms of the application process for an apprenticeship is essentially like applying for a job. So students would apply directly to the employer, not through UCAS, which is great because it means students can apply for university as well as applying for apprenticeships. And we would always recommend that they should do this. The process would usually be some form of application or CV, online aptitude tests. These could be verbal, numerical, situational judgment, psychometric tests. There may be a video or phone interview. Would there be an assessment centre, which could be online or in person, an interview with a senior member of the firm or a partner, and a contract. So you're looking at the process taking a good few months to complete. In terms of when apprenticeships open for applications, some companies will open in the autumn term. So some of the big accounting firms will open in October, November. And then there's another lot that come out sort of in February, March time. So this year that was places like National Grid, Dunelm and E.ON. Students can apply for as many as they want, but we do recommend that that it's better to do a small number of focused applications rather than lots of general ones. We offer a range of targeted support at WQE that's specific for our apprenticeship students, including things like the careers fair, which we've mentioned. We have employer talks, we have mock interviews and mock assessment centres, we have workshops, one-to-one support and coaching. So there's lots of support going on for our students that are specifically looking at higher and degree level apprenticeships. And it's really important that students engage with us, and they hear me saying this a lot, but check their emails just so they don't miss out on those opportunities that will really help them. The next slide just gives an overview of some of the companies that offer opportunities at higher degree level. And the following slide just gives some useful websites. And I just wanted to point out a couple of of websites on here that they're all great and they're all ones that we would recommend. Pathway CTM is really good because it has advice that's specific for parents and events that are specific for parents. So their content is really good quality and aimed specifically at parents. And the higher and degree vacancy listing is exactly what it says. It's a listing of the main higher and degree apprenticeships that were available this year, and it will tell you the company, what the role is, the starting salary, where it's based, crucially, and there's a link through to the application page. That is all for me on apprenticeships. So I know there's been some questions come in to the chat. So while Jamie's doing his session, I will answer as many of those as I can that are for me. The final slide, and this will be on the presentation that we upload to the website, is just some contacts in case you needed to contact us. And I am now going to hand over to Jamie to talk to us about all things student finance.
First off, I'd like to start off by just saying I've worked with WQE now for years, and both my nephews came through the college and are now at university. Despite having one of the biggest volumes of students of any school and college we work with, the level of support is absolutely amazing. So if in doubt, never hesitate to reach out. They're massively experienced and will guide you and your son and daughter all the way through the process. So you're in safe hands. Speaking of safe hands, let's talk about Student Finance England and how you actually go about the process of applying to university. So I'm kind of assuming nothing here, and I'll go through the whole process step by step to give you a framework as to timelines, process, amounts, and hopefully cover off most things as we go. I'm trying to be a bit clever. I've got two screens and my phone, so I can still see the chat. So if you have any questions about the finance, drop them in the chat and I'll try and pick them up verbally as we go. I'm going to try and do the tandem of being fast because I'm conscious of your time, but thorough because I'm conscious that finance when it comes to university is such a critical part of a decision-making journey. So I shall, without further ado, move on through those slides. So slide one is just a general headline explaining what I'm going to talk about, but giving you that big, all-important tuition fee figure. So the government will support students guaranteed for 4 years of undergraduate study. In some cases, students can get extended funding beyond that, but the core package is 4 years of study. Tuition fees, the government put an increase in tuition fees last autumn in the budget of a few £100s. So tuition fees now can maximise up to £9,535, but there will be a little bit of variance university by university, but the typical university degree will be charging that maximum amount of £9,535. But as Kate alluded to, there are HTC's high technical product courses coming online that I think are going to grow quite a lot in the next couple of years, as well as the apprenticeship. So whilst degrees will always be at this price, there is still differentiation in the market in terms of the type of courses you can do. I'm going to go and talk about the main sources of funding that you'll get, which is a tuition fee loan and a maintenance loan, and then I'll talk about how eligibility and application processes work as well. So we'll start off with tuition fees, as this obviously is the big headline and the biggest fundamental difference between school and college and university. Making your decision at 16 as to where to go and study is a big decision. There's numerous local colleges, there's loads and loads of local sixth forms, as well as more vocational routes at 16. So making the big decision as you do at 18, you're kind of already done at 16. It's just the biggest set of choices. But the biggest difference when it comes to what you do post 18 is the funding situation. And so university, like I mentioned, tuition fees £9,535. The positive news is the tuition fee loan is a pot of money that all students are able to apply for if you're a home student, quote, and basically, it means if you're a UK resident and living in the UK, and there's all sorts of other bits of small print now as well. But if you're labelled as a home student, and gov.co.uk can give you lots more information on that definition, then you're entitled to what's called a tuition fee loan. That means that during the time of being a student, the student and the family don't need to cover those tuition fees. The government covers them in the short term. So they're paid directly to university. You don't have to worry about it in year 1, year 2, year 3 or year 4 if we do a 4-year degree. They're only paid in once you enroll at university. So by doing a UCAS application, you're not committing to this 9,535. You're only starting the process of the fee loan when you actually register to commence your university degree, usually at the end of September. In the case of most of this audience, September 2026 or 2027 with a gap year. And if you don't complete your whole degree, you'll be eligible to pay back a proportion rather than a whole element of the fee. So tuition fee loans are there to avoid those needs for upfront payments, to try and level the playing field, and to make sure that the core accessibility of university is there and available to everybody. So fees are 9,535, but tuition fee loan is non-means tested and covers all of those fees for all home applications going to university. What it covers the core of the university experience, all teaching, so staff, lectures, seminars, practicals, admin fees, all the facilities, the library, the IT, all the support services. Essentially, tuition fees are the primary source of income for a university. Interestingly, the fees haven't gone up fundamentally since 2012. They got raised to 9,000 in 2012. So we're, as a business, having to supplement our income with all sorts of other income streams these days, apprenticeships, HTQs, overseas campuses, those types of things. But tuition fees for home students are still the primary source of income for the majority of UK teaching universities. But what doesn't the tuition fee cover? Well, the tuition fee loan is not designed to cover those kind of softer lifestyle costs of being a university student. Some of these are core elements of moving away and going to university: rent, insurance, bills. My colleague who knocked up the presentation clearly feels that fancy dress outfits are also a critical part of university, but essentially the fee loan covers the fees, but then there's still all of these lifestyle choices to pay on top of that. Now, where you go to uni will make a big difference on what the scale of those choices are. Living in Leicester and the East Mids, you're lucky to have a really wide range of local commutable universities. There's 3 universities in Leicestershire alone, but then you've also got quite a number, probably 4 or 5, of what I'd class as reasonably commutable options as well. So moving away from home isn't compulsory. Moving away is, yeah, arguably it's a more exciting, holistic experience, but at the same time, it's a more expensive experience. So pros and cons. But what you do have to cover these costs is what's called a maintenance loan. This is what we'd classically call the student loan back in old money. When you hear the language, the student loan, this is typically what they're talking about. I don't really like the use of the word loan at all, because it makes it a loan seen as a negative piece. When you buy a house and you borrowed a mortgage to buy a house, everyone sends you congratulations cards and you have a big moving in party. When you take out a student loan, people kind of label it as debt and see it as a bad thing. What I would see the loans as is an investment in the holistic experience that university provides, which is the academic input, the broader skills and holistic development, the graduate opportunities, the wider support that university gives. I definitely see it as an investment in the short, medium and long term, rather than purely just the cost and just the borrowing. But either way, whatever we call it, the maintenance loan is designed to cover that full and broader financial set of costs when it comes to university. Help with living costs, rent, bills, food, course supplies. Now, the difference with this one, rather than being paid directly to the university, this one, quite scarily for the parents, is paid directly to the students into their bank accounts, paid in 3 instalments in each year. Broadly speaking, the start of the autumn term, the start of the spring term in January, and then the start of the summer term, kind of Easter period, paid in 3 instalments to help students manage it carefully, as I'm sure they will, across the core of the year. The biggest difference with this loan versus the tuition fee loan is that this loan is means tested. The phrase means tested means that it is based on the household income of the sponsor. The sponsor typically being the parents, but it could be guardians, it could be grandparents. It's the primary responsibility and where the student lives at the current time. There is a scheme called the Student Finance Calculator, which you can Google or use other search engines to find, and that gives you a pretty accurate guesstimation of what your situation will be. So go online, have a look at Student Finance Calculator, pop in an idea of the type of uni you might want to go to, very, very broad, an idea of household income, and it will do the calculations and give you a pretty good idea of what your maintenance loan situation is going to be. It's really worth doing because it takes away some of that unknown. But the figures are on the screen here, and you'll see that there's quite a bit of difference when you look at income level versus the amount of loans that you'll get. The other point to bear in mind is not only is the amount of loan based on household income, it's also based on the decision logistically of how you go about university. If you live at home, you get a bit less. If you move away, but not to an expensive part of the country, or not a super expensive part of the country, you get a bit more. If you move to London, you get a bit more again. One thing to bear in mind is if you are going to a genuinely local university, just pick a random example, De Montfort University, do you even necessarily need to take out a maintenance loan? Because the day-to-day costs are not going to be that much higher than commuting from home to go and study at WQE. So this money is optional, and the student may think it's critical. I can't live without it. Of course I need it, but do have a think about that. And the amounts, as you'll see, the top row is really designed to target genuine low-income households and make sure there is extensive support there to make sure that participation with the university is not completely barriered by financial situations. So £25,000 household income or less, and you'll see the loan is a maximum of £8,877 for living at home and increase for those other categories. The government don't like round figures. There's no tombola winning figures. It all ends in 7s or 8s or 2s. As you go up through the household income, you will see the amount of loan that you can get for the living costs reduces in each threshold, up to 65,000, where that base loan is coming in at 3,907. The idea is that the base loan can still cover the core of the living costs, being the rent and being the bills and those types of pieces. It isn't necessarily going to cover that holistic lifestyle. So you might need to look at additional income streams to make sure you can get those high quality fancy dress outfits and Netflix and those types of things. I'll talk about supplementary income shortly, but it's all the fairly obvious things. It's the student getting a part-time job. It's trying to work and save during the quite extensive summer holidays. It's the potential of a parental contribution. Doesn't have to be huge, but it can make a difference. It's savings. It's all those types of things. And if you do a work placement, as I did in my third year, that will pay you a salary that can also contribute towards your lifestyle. So the maintenance loan, again, available for everybody. The difference to a tuition fee loan is it is means tested, and there will be quite a bit of variance as to how much students actually get. But as I mentioned, Student Finance Calculator, pop onto Google, really, really useful, gives you a pretty accurate estimation of where you will be, and then you can start to plan a bit when you're looking at accommodation costs and those types of things to work out how much the income is likely to be for you. And it is gross income, just seen in the chat there. Sorry if I'm not clarifying. So it's looking at gross income rather than net. So you'll see about £25,000 actually is genuinely very low income households. Not uncommonly, a lot of households, even earning average salaries, are already moving into the higher thresholds the way this works. The increased amounts are very much just designed to remove those barriers for those lower and lower middle income households. How to apply. So I'll cover this bit pretty quickly because you'll get loads more support on this. There's a body called Student Finance England, SFE. They manage your finance applications, and chronologically you would do UCAS first. So right at this stage, it's all about researching the bigger picture. What am I thinking? What are my priorities? Do I want to do a degree, an apprenticeship? Do I research both? What do I think my ideal combination of, experience and skills and graduate output's going to be? This is the research phase. As alluded to, UCAS takes place in the autumn and then over the spring. You'll apply for your student finance off the back of the UCAS application. There's never a fixed application opening date. It's always some point February, March, depending when government submit a white paper for SFE to go ahead with it. But you've got 2 or 3 month window. February, March, April, May type of time, that's when you apply for the funding. One application form, you apply for the fee loan and the maintenance loan together. You don't need to fill in separate application forms. My top tip would be, once this window opens and you receive your email to say student finance applications are now open, jump on it quick and get the process moving, because it can take them a while to go through those processes, and you're better to be in there early rather than later. So you want to be aware of it at this stage and think about it at this stage, but you don't need to actively do anything until after UCAS applications in spring 2026. What sort of information do they need? The student fills out the application first, and the initial part of the application is their core details: formal identification, universities they've applied to or thinking of applying to, bank details. So do get a bank account set up if not already, get one with good packages, free rail card, interest-free overdraft, those types of things. Then the sponsor's details get added to the form, usually parent or carer, but it depends on your own individual situation. And it can holistically end to end take 14 weeks to process. It usually doesn't, but occasionally it can. So you do have to think about it. If you are looking to go and do a university degree overseas, as I've seen someone doing in the chat, your Student Finance England would not necessarily cover you for that. And tuition fees and finance packages are very different in different parts of the EU. Traditionally speaking, the best value for money was kind of Northern Europe, Scandinavia. But do your research, and given that the government is trying to rebuild some bridges with the EU, there may be some changes and some more positive movement across those fronts. But your application process here is applying as if you're going for a UK-based university. So a bit like doing an apprenticeship, applying overseas needs an extra bit of legwork, an extra bit of kind of time and focus looking at it. But there are some good opportunities to have, and there are some university courses taught in English, but you have got to do your legwork and do your research. But I guess the college, having 1,500 students a year, will no doubt have seen this and be able to give you some advice as well. Then it comes to your sponsor. So once the sponsor's been nominated on the form, Student Finance England then reach out, typically to you, the parent, asking for you to complete your parts of the application form: national insurance number, evidence of income from previous tax year, details of other dependents, and a few other bits and pieces, but they are the primary sources of information they will need. So try and get hold of that financial information in front of you when you come to fill out the form. So remind your son or daughter, because their email will get the form. They fill out this bit, they'll then get the notification to say sponsor. So just keep an eye on the inbox, and once the sponsor invitation comes in, try and jump on that as soon as you can. Want to briefly talk about this. There's all sorts of niche pots of funding for all sorts of niche students, and the gov.co.uk website can really help. But strange students is an interesting one. So if you've got an individual within the college, or if there's a student in this stream here who isn't supported by family and isn't in touch with family, then you can have an independent status. Can be dictated on the application form, but there does need to be a level of evidence to, prove that the student is estranged. I sometimes talk to students who think they're estranged. It just means they haven't spoken to their parents over dinner for a couple of weeks, So estranged genuinely means that you are not in that supportive environment of being within a family home, and a number of other statuses. But it's worth thinking about if anybody is in this kind of individual situation. Now, the biggest bit. So far, we've talked about receiving money from the government, which is obviously good news. Who wouldn't want to receive money from the government? Let's face it, we don't get much of that in our lives, do we? So the fact there is a tuition fee loan, and the fact there is a maintenance loan, and you can have the funding to help bridge the gap of going to university, is fundamentally good news. Certainly far better than no funding at all. Obviously, the caveat to this process, and the bit I think it's really important to get your heads around, is the repayments of the loan after graduation. Now, I'm going to kind of pitch my psychological way of dealing with this one. So first of all, it's balanced out as one singular repayment. So you don't pay two different pots back for two different loans. Your total set of borrowing comes in as one total student loan. The first plus point, and I think a really important one to notice, you don't trigger any repayments until you earn £25,000 a year, and you don't trigger anything until April after graduation. So say your first graduate job pays you £22,000, you're not making any repayments towards that loan. Say you never earn £25,000, you're never making any repayments towards that loan. But do not deliberately reduce your income. That doesn't make sense long term. It's more if your job and your career is more about your heart and your soul rather than your wallet, and you're in that type of job, then you know the repayments won't happen. Then the key bit to understand is once you start repaying, those repayments are now triggered specifically by how much you earn rather than how much you have borrowed. So you think of credit card or mortgage, they're not looking at your income, they're purely looking at your borrowing and charging your repayments based on that. The loan here is triggered specifically by your income. So it's much more like how income tax or national insurance works than it is a mortgage or a credit card. And if your income goes down, your repayments will go down. And if your income goes below 25,000, your repayments will stop. So thinking of maternity or paternity or redundancy or those types of things. Essentially, you repay 9% of your earnings over and beyond £25,000 a year. Let me put some figures on it and you will you'll get that. But you're all right there in the chat that the national living wage has gone up now to such an extent that if you're working full time on what will be labelled that national living wage, you could actually start triggering these repayments, which is interesting. I mean, this figure 25,000, it's gone up and gone down, but largely it stayed about the same for a few years, whereas that for minimum wage has gone up and up and up quite extensively in the last few years, and did again in last autumn's budget. Conscious of time, so I shall rattle through some of these pieces, but also conscious how important this bit is. It's calculated by Her Majesty's Revenues and Customs and paid out of your wages, and it comes out of your wages gross in your payslip in the same way as your national insurance and your income tax will. Repayments stop after 40 years. I don't know if that's a selling point. The government thinks it is, but if you're graduating at 21, that puts you at 61. Hurrah, your repayments stop. Essentially, what you are doing is repaying initially a small amount and then potentially an intermediate amount over a long period. But the key bit is that amount is always that same ratio of your income. So you're not suddenly going to be paying back huge amounts that is way beyond your means and ability to do so. Loan does not affect credit score, so it doesn't stop you getting a mortgage, buying a car on finance, any of those types of things. And I know that for a fact because I did all of those things with my loan. And great news for parents, the loan cannot be passed on or inherited. So the loan is specifically and only for the individual student, so graduate, who has taken this funding out. And probably important to bear in mind, it isn't your 17-year-old son or daughter now who's got this repayment. It's your 21, 22-year-old, hopefully fully working son or daughter in the future. And the way I think about it is, if you earn loads of money, then yes, you will start paying bigger amounts back. If you don't earn loads of money, you'll only pay back small amounts and you'll never pay all of it back. So this is the slide I've been holding you back from. This is your income in the future linked to the repayments that you would make towards the student loan. So you'll see on an income of 25,000, you're at the trigger point, but you're not beyond it. So the student loan repayments is zero. But imagine you've earned 5,000 more and you're now on to £30,000 a year, a decent salary for someone in a kind of, early to mid 20s. At that stage, your gross income is 2,500 and you're paying £37.50 back towards a loan at this point, probably about the same as you're paying on the mobile phone. As you go up through those income thresholds, you will see the amounts grow and grow. At £50,000 a year, at that stage, the repayments you're triggering is £187.50. So it's always incremental with your income. It can go down as well as it can come up, but it's never going to be a proportion anything beyond those ratios. And the deal you sign up to, even if they change the future repayment systems for the worse, the deal you signed up to is the deal that you'll stick with. So those future changes won't have an impact. If you've got multiple kids, it does affect the means testing, but not by that much. It affects it in the term of hundreds of pounds of difference of money they get, rather than thousands of pounds of money that you get. And when it comes to students who are in that slightly more complicated home or international status, universities do what they call a fee status questionnaire, where you'll fill in details about residency, nationality, where you've been living, when you've been living, where you've been paying tax, and that will calculate whether or not it is a home related fee. Interest rates, thank you very much there for teeing me up on that one. Sheena, you clearly preempted this one. Interest rates has got better in this last government change. It used to be RPI plus 3%, which made it quite significant. Now it's literally retail price index of inflation. So there's no additional interest on top other than the baseline inflation rate. So that makes it go up a lot slower than it did when it was RPI plus 3%. But at the same time, if inflation goes up like it did last year, the interest will actually obviously slightly increase there as well. Again, all the small print on this is on the Student Finance England website. So you can just Google Student Finance England and get loads. Right, a few other pieces, and then I shall leave you to questions in your evening. Scholarships and bursaries do exist. They exist in all sorts of different formats. Universities offer them themselves. Sometimes there's local or regional schemes. A scholarship or a bursary is a free pot of money. So never be turning down anything free. So scholarship, bursary, money in your pocket, you don't have to repay, based on academic, based on achievements, based on sports, music, personal circumstances, and sometimes bursaries can be based on financial need. So lower income background students can get additional funding to top up on top of the loans. There's also additional funding for students taking certain groups of NHS courses. Again, you can get loads more details on this, but if you're taking a core group of NHS courses where we're looking to make sure they're incentivizing people doing those degrees, I've got a slide actually, you can get additional funding there. Available through the NHS Learning Support Fund. You apply for this as a spin-off off the back of the student finance application, up to £5,000 training grant. Additional grants can be in place based on additional personal circumstances. And there's also an additional grant available for some medical or dental courses too. There's loads more detail on this on both the Student Finance England website and the NHS website, but it's well worth thinking about. Don't take an NHS related course just because you've got the incentivized package, because obviously you've got to be a nurse, a midwife for a number of years, but it's worth bearing in mind if you are looking at those courses, because part-time work and things are a bit tougher because they run a more intense week and they run more weeks in the year. So this funding is partly designed to incentivize and reduce the barriers, and partly designed to balance the books because you can't do the same kind of income generation as students on other courses. Really important to talk about DSA, Disabled Student Allowance. Universities are great places for support for students with any form of disability, physical, mental. We have huge amounts of students. We have dedicated expert team. We are there to help. And DSA also gives additional funding to support that day-to-day student experience. All free, non-repayable. The idea is it reduces those barriers and levels the playing field to give everybody the opportunity to have a great experience. Most important thing regarding disability for me is 100% always declare it on the UCAS application form. It in no way, shape or form prejudices decision making, but it absolutely immediately opens you up to all sorts of support, both financial and also conversations with the university about support when you start. So never worry about declaring it. You are always better to be open, and then that support can positively be put forward. But you can imagine 25,000 students. We've dealt with and managed and supported all sorts of scenarios and put all sorts of wonderful, reasonable adjustments in play. I'm not quite sure what the photo's got to do with the content, but there you go. It's a nice photo, isn't it? Care leavers, Again, additional pots of money, additional points of support. There are grants in place there as well. You do need to check with current local authorities. There are some different rules and regulations around there. But every university has dedicated expert staff to support students coming from a care background, because we know it's a more complicated and less supported journey typically. I mentioned this one before: supplementary income, part-time job. Really, really valuable in terms of skills and experience, but also really, really helpful. And this is where minimum wage helps, because the typical part-time job now is earning 12, 13, 14 pounds an hour. You know, our job working for the uni as a student ambassador, for example, pays that sort of money. So to balance the books a bit, working 5, 10 hours a week can really make a difference. Holidays, you get 3.5, 4 months. Work in the summer holidays, save the money if you can be in a great place. Internships, part-time work, which are blocks of work within your course, or short-term placements, or whole year work placements by sandwich courses. Most DMU degrees do a whole year's placement, massively worth doing. Savings, I know 16, 17-year-olds don't always have extensive savings, but if they work now and put £10 a week away, that's a decent nest egg come next September. Parental support, the idea is that the loans added in with some of the scholarships are designed to remove the need for parents to support. But as always in your son or daughter's lives, you know, every little helps and those types of things. But have those conversations, work out what is practical, realistic. My top tip, if I was putting money into a parent, and actually I soon will be, is put money towards something tangible, so you know exactly where it's going. Rent, Tesco shopping, bills, those types of things, rather than just money into your son or daughter's account, which you've got less of an audit trail on, if you know what I'm saying. Budgeting tips: use your wisdom living and managing a budget, you know, they're really, really important. But student bank account with benefits, get some perks in the deal, do a bit of planning, you know, sit down as a family, work it all out. You know, the money's got to last, and young people aren't used to managing this sort of cash. Work out essentials versus luxuries when it comes to gym, phone, Netflix, those types of things. Keep an eye out for discounts, student discounts, and the Uniday app can give all sorts of different discounts. And be careful of books. Academics will always tout you need to buy about 20 different books. You really don't. You need to have a relatively narrow set of core textbooks, and the rest can be bought from the library or online, or bought between 2 or 3 people. Don't rush off to Waterspoons and spend an absolute fortune, as someone not too far from this room definitely did. And the finance application form, if you've got all your paperwork to hand, literally takes 10 minutes. So there is no reason at all not to jump on it quick when it comes in. That is the most important thing. Do not put it off. Make sure the application is done as soon as it can be, and then you guarantee the funding being in place when you start university in next September, October. I think my final takeaway is, university is not a cheap thing to do, but for me, it is an absolute life-changing opportunity. The years I spent at uni changed me completely as a person, holistically, in terms of my whole sense of who I was, my confidence, my communication. It was a genuinely life-changing thing. It isn't just a degree and a course, it's a whole set of skills and set of confidence builds, and it really sets you up for the person you will be in the future. So don't just look at it as a cost, look at it as an investment in the wonderful opportunities. But the most important final line before I shut up and leave you alone: work out what is most important to you as a student, as a family, and make your decisions based on that. Understanding what you want and what is most important to you is the best way of being able to make educated and informed choices. Thank you so much, and back to Andrew in the studio.
Thanks so much, Jamie. I'm always absolutely in awe of your ability to get through so much information on student finance. We try and get the balance between giving you as much information as we think is helpful and useful, with not going on for ages and ages. So apologies if some of that has felt like it's been coming at you and you've been indulged in something of information overload. As Kate mentioned in the chat, we will just top and tail the recording so that you don't end up listening, watching through the sort of setup procedure, but that will be available through the college website. And it's probably also important to say that lots of the information that we've been talking through with you will also be talked through with students as part of their PPM sessions and as part of the FutureWise event. And finally, from me, we've tried to answer as many questions in the chat as we possibly can. We may have missed some, particularly if they are slightly more specific to a particular student or a particular circumstance. What we really encourage you to do is to go back to those contact details that Kate talked about, particularly your students' personal progress mentor, their PPM, and we'll answer all your queries, and it'll either be we'll know straight away, or if we don't know straight away, we will find out. So thanks very much for your attention and for joining us this evening. Hope you enjoy the rest of your evening, and best wishes for the conversations that you're going to be having with sons, daughters, people you've got responsible for at home, and we always look forward to supporting students as they kind of think through whatever they go on to next. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much. Have a lovely evening.